And welcome to Conversations on Care, a Facebook talk show, bringing together our healthcare partners, our clients, and caregivers to help our families better understand and cope with aging parents with chronic care needs. My name is Julie Collada, and I am the founder and CEO of Open Arms Solutions. And Open Arms is a home care agency serving the Chicagoland area, focused on providing inspired home care solutions for seniors with chronic conditions such as dementia, Parkinson's, and other movement disorders. It's our mission to help our families through this journey and to know that their loved ones are living their best lives possible. If you find this information helpful, please give us a like and a share so that it can reach more people who need this information. If you have a topic that you'd like to learn more about, please put it in the comment sections and we'll do our best to get that on the show. With me today is a return guest, Suzy Carbrey, founder of Cognitive Communication Solutions. Let me just read a little bio about Suzy. Suzy is a speech language pathologist with a focus on working with adults to improve their communication, cognition, and executive functioning skills. She also provides support to family members of those with those conditions affected. Let me say that again. She also works with family members of those with conditions that affect thinking and communication who want to maintain a positive relationship with and support their loved ones. So our topic today is organizing the day and engaging loved ones in enriching activities. Welcome again, Suzy.
Thank you for having me, Julie, and happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you too. So let's just start with the basics of how did you arrive at becoming a speech language pathologist?
Yeah, I think the biggest reason why I became a speech language pathologist is because when I started my university, I took a course that was called Career Explorations. And you spend the whole semester researching careers and taking personality tests and figuring out what's the best fit for you. I think everyone should do this. But at the end of my class, I had decided on speech language pathology. I was pretty close to done with my art history degree. So I finished that and then right afterwards went to graduate school for speech language pathology. I think looking back, there's a lot of personal factors that influenced me as well. I did speech therapy as a child. I have a sister who needed a lot of therapy and support, and I've always had a really strong interest in communication and thinking skills. So I think it was my rabbit hole that I could go down and research forever.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what's the difference between a speech language pathologist and a speech therapist?
So it's the same thing. Our official title is speech language pathologist. People tend to call us speech therapist because it's easier to say. But it's the same. Just our official title is speech language pathologist.
Thanks for clarifying that. That's what I imagined, but I think it's good for everyone watching to understand that because we get those questions quite a bit. And you said you went to graduate school to become a speech language pathologist. So what's that training like? Can you describe that?
Yeah, it's pretty intensive. We do a lot of studying. So we really cover everything within communication and cognition for all ages. So we're taking courses from pediatric swallowing courses, adult swallowing courses on cognition and things that affect cognition, from brain injury, neurologic conditions, early language development. There's so much to it. And then we have a strong clinical piece too. So pretty much from the beginning of graduate school, we have clients that we're working with. You somewhat get to choose the types of clients. I always tried to take adult clients because I knew that's what I wanted. But it's really a broad field where we can go in so many different directions. So graduate school is pretty intense because you're learning everything within swallowing, communication, cognition. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much training that we have and how much we can do with people in the areas, particularly of swallowing and cognition. Sometimes I feel like people think, oh, why are you working with memory or attention or problem solving?
Right.
But in my work with adults, that's been so much of what I've done.
That makes sense. And that is, thank you for that explanation, because I think that's very helpful for people. So talk to us a little bit about what stage, when people reach out to you, what's often going on for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, there's two main points that people reach out to me. So I do work both with, I work with adults of all ages. So my direct work is primarily adults who are still in the workforce, they're professionals, but having trouble with attention, memory, organization, those sorts of things. And so those people reach out just when they're struggling keeping up with all the demands of life. And then what we're primarily talking about today is my coaching and consulting services. And for those services, I'm often working with the loved ones of those who have Parkinson's or dementia. And there's two main stages when they'll start with me. One, at the beginning of a diagnosis, which is a great time to start. If somebody's wanting to have more training and education and really know a little bit more about what to expect and how to be prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second time that people come is, after they've already had a diagnosis and their loved one is changing and progressing within the condition. And maybe they're having trouble with daily activities or communication. They're really struggling with knowing what their loved one has to say or what they want and need. And so those are the two main times, beginning with the diagnosis or when they're having more challenges that all come in.
I think back to when in 2006, when my mother suddenly started to fail cognitively. And I had so many questions. At that point, I didn't understand the disease. I think you and I have talked about how important education is for families,
Mm-hmm.
and for them to help them understand what's going on in the brain and why communication is so difficult. Why is my loved one, when I go tell them to brush their teeth, they're pausing where they used to always know how to, do that. Boy, I wish I would have known about your services back then, because that would have helped immensely. And so, I think about families that we work with and now what we watch them go through. And to be able to have someone to refer them to, like you, is an incredibly important resource. I'm working with one particular family right now who the person, I'm going to be meeting with the husband of this individual, and unfortunately her mother had Alzheimer's, her brother had Alzheimer's, and this is actually someone that is a friend to me. This family's friends to me, and now this individual is starting to really decline cognitively, and constant repetition. Every morning the husband, who's tired, you can tell, has the same routine with his wife, who is, he's so devoted to, gets her started for the day, but it's like Groundhog's Day, right? And so the little bit of education that I've done, very little bit, I hope has helped, and there'll be more to come, because that's very important to us at Open Arms, that we provide not only the care, but the education and the referrals to professionals like you. But the little bit of an explanation I did, that, your wife's part of her brain, her hippocampus, is just not working right now, right? That part of the brain is just not, and that's the part of short-term memory. And just to help people understand, because it's so confusing when you see behaviors and frightening, in your loved one. So.
And I think it does help a lot. And I think it helps people change their perspective and their mindset and maybe not be so frustrated with that person when they
Yeah.
understand, oh, there's this part of the brain that I can be frustrated with, or
Yes. Yeah.
it just puts a different lens on it. And I think also it helps people realize that there are things you can do. You know, I think with progressive conditions, a lot of times people think this is it. This is the cards that I'm dealt, and they don't even know to look into strategies and techniques, especially with communication, that there are other ways to communicate and other ways to try to stay connected. And if you don't know, you just don't know.
Yeah. Oh, and such important resource and help for people. I can absolutely speak to that from my experience. So you talked about, the people call typically right after diagnosis. Some people do right after they get a diagnosis, and that's always a great thing to do.
Yes.
Um, and then they also call though then later when things are really getting more challenging and they're frustrated, tired, don't know what to do, and they're looking for solutions. Who do you typically work with in the family? What does that process look like?
I'm most often working with the spouse, but I do also work with the children and the caregivers. I would say the person who's most involved in the daily care is who would benefit the most from working with me. And it is most often the spouse that I have experience working with.
And in the first meeting that you have with that individual, what do you talk about and what do you do?
So I really try to get at the core of why are they reaching out at this time? What are their challenges and their daily struggles, as well as what are their goals and priorities? And then I can create a picture of here's where we're at, here's where we would like to go, and start to create a plan. So it's a lot of questions, figuring out where the challenges and the goals are, and then starting to put a plan together.
That sounds great. So you do an assessment. You ask questions and you really do a thorough assessment.
Yes, it's an informal assessment, so it's a lot of reports from the family, questionnaires that I'll run through, but it gives me a good baseline of the person that I'm working with, their perspective of their loved one's functioning, and what's happening with their communication. Are they able to follow the daily schedule and routines? Are they able to express their wants and needs and comprehend? And then I can take that information and know where to start with strategies with developing a plan.
That's great. And the topic today is about how to best organize the loved one's day, um, with activities, right? So how do you play into that piece of things?
Yeah, I do lump together the daily routines and schedules as well as the activities. So I'm gathering a lot of information about the person's habits, their preferences, everything from food preferences to swallowing issues, their daily routine, the order that they like to do things, sensory preferences, social background. Do they prefer to be with people? Do they prefer to be alone? Their self care frequencies and routines, and dressing habits and routines. So, really digging into a lot of self care things, history with their leisure, history with their occupation. And that gives us information to come up with a really consistent schedule and routine, but then thoughtfully adding in those engaging activities that we're pulling from things that we can take a pretty good guess that they would enjoy and they would be active with and engaged. And then we can create a bigger picture with engaging activities, not just the things that we have to do.
Yeah. And that's great. And how just help us understand, help me understand, um, how that though, or maybe give an example of once you understand all of these environmental preferences, self-care routines, um, sleep cycles, all those things, dressing habits and routines. Why is that important? How does that help make the activities more joyful, meaningful, successful?
Uh-huh. One of the primary things it does is it kind of simplifies things for the person who has the condition, whether it's dementia or Parkinson's, but it just, because their processing is going to be slower, so it helps them simplify what's happening, especially if things are happening in a very regular, very routine sort of way. Even if they consciously don't know it, they'll know this pattern of the day and the feel of the day, and it feels the same every day. And that really just helps simplify their environment. By knowing all these things and creating activities that they will enjoy, it will help maintain a positive relationship, helps maintain communication, even if it's not verbal communication, but we're doing things within, their favorite hobby of gardening, and I'm talking about it and you are engaged and you look like you're enjoying it. We're just maintaining that relationship, simplifying things because I'm joining them within their interest rather than asking them to join me in something that they might not be able to follow, something new. And we're not asking so much from their memory if we're pulling from things that are really long-term things that they have done or experiences that they've had. And ultimately it can reduce some challenging situations that might arise.
Makes sense. Is it also just saying in a different way? Is it things like, and we know when we do an assessment, someone really likes to take and typically takes a nap in the afternoon, right? It's important for us to know that. This is an example of understanding, because if we try to plan an activity when they typically are tired and they need to rest, right?
Uh-huh.
Rest and restoration is an important activity. And if
Yep.
you try to force, in your example, gardening in that space where they really need to rest, they won't enjoy it. It's likely to not be successful, not be enjoyable. Is that
right? It's exactly that. Yes. So, working within their normal cycles and not
sure?
pushing against what's natural for them,
Sure.
just that will help a lot. And I think we all have these things that are different, but we don't think about. So your example, napping in the afternoon, some people would, some people never would. Or like I shower in the afternoon, which I feel like is such an unusual time. So if somebody didn't know that and they were wanting me to shower every day in the morning, I might push back. That's not how I do things.
Sure.
Or even from the way we arrange our spaces and our time, all of that goes in. So you can still have the gardening activity, but let's just do it at a time that really they're functioning and they want to do it more.
It just
Functioning better.
it's so important, right? And again, before I got into this world in this industry, and I didn't understand that. I didn't understand. I would try to, my mom, used to be very active in the evening, and we'd have really great conversations in the evening. When her, after she had been diagnosed with a mixed dementia, I tried to continue that, and it wasn't effective for her at that time of day for so many reasons.
And it is a balance. It's a balance of reflecting on their past, but then noticing if things have changed. Maybe they don't want to stay up late anymore.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes, exactly right. So what are some just overall important communication strategies as a care partner?
I think one of the biggest things, which is not always easy, but is patience. So having having the patience to slow down a little bit, to let your loved one process information. You're going to have to speak slower. You're going to have to use shorter sentences, concrete language, but having the time to not feel unhurried or rushed, that can help a lot. If somebody is not understanding you and maybe you say, what do you want for dinner? And they're not able to tell you what they want, think about how you can scaffold your language. So then maybe you give two choices. If that's still too hard, maybe you say, do you want choice A? You make it a yes, no question. And there's different ways to scaffold language so it's easier and helps them express their wants and needs. Another thing for comprehension, giving directions one step at a time, having things in sight, pointing to something. Maybe you need to go take them to get dressed in the bedroom. Kind of point the direction that you're going at, as well as verbally saying it.
Mm-hmm.
And as things progress, written words can help depending on the person, or pictures. So maybe you take an actual picture to communicate where things are in their environment, and that can help a lot too.
Yeah, that's all great suggestions. I've gone through some training that, really ahas that have been so helpful when we work with people. And an example is, when we often give to family, or I give to families, is, if someone told me to go brush my teeth, or told you to go brush your teeth, simple. We go brush our teeth, right? We've been doing it for our whole lives, most of our lives. But when you really break down all the different steps that are involved when we go and brush our teeth, that's I think, a good example of what you were just saying. When you go brush your teeth, first of all, you've got to go find your toothbrush, find the toothpaste, put a little toothpaste on the end of the toothbrush. Maybe I like to run that under the faucet and get a little wet, then hold it up to my mouth with usually my left hand, because I'm left-handed, and then it goes on and on, right? There's
a lot to it.
There's a lot to it. And so, before, I've been involved with supporting our clients with dementia and families and training. I just never even thought about that, but I think that builds upon what you're saying.
And I think what people often do is not only say, hey, can you go brush your teeth? They say, can you go use the restroom, wash your hands, brush your teeth so you can go to bed? So then think of each one of those things broken down that way.
Right.
It's too much to process.
It's too much to process. Yeah. So you're right. So can you just give us an example of some of the kind of case studies, people you've worked with, and how that's impacted the communication with their loved one? And can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm thinking of an example of someone I've worked with recently who had Lewy body dementia. And the wife reached out when they were having a lot of struggles with the morning routine, because he could still be independent with a lot of things as far as, walking and his fine motor movements. Like, he was pretty independent, but where the breakdown was happening was the cognition, remembering all the steps, remembering everything to do. And she was still really active and involved. And so it was hard for her to have to constantly go back and forth to help him just with getting ready in the morning. And so one thing we did that really helped a lot is, the way you were describing breaking down the steps for brushing the teeth, is writing that out and posting it where he can check off and he can be independent to keep track of, here's where I'm at in the sequence and here's what's next. That helped a lot. And then just teaching her how to support him in other ways with visual notes and schedules that are posted so he could see it and remind himself. That made it easier for her because she didn't have to be there all the time. side by side with him.
Sure.
And also just teaching her how to change her language so she's not saying so much at once, or presenting things in a way that he can express his wants and needs. That did help a lot. I also just helped her as far as engaging activities and coming up with things, sending a lot of resources, including music therapy and companions, but thinking of other ways to keep him engaged within things that he really liked to do.
So you're helping both of them.
Yes, indirectly him, but
Sure.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you're giving coaching to the spouse on how to, engage their loved one in a more meaningful way. The spouse is getting more out of their day, and they're both getting more out of the day. You free up the spouse to go live their life, right? And
ideally, it's just a more connected environment, when you're not always feeling the stress of
yes,
you're not following what I'm saying,
yes,
just have the focus on the engagement and pleasurable activities and slowing down and hopefully feeling good most of the day.
yeah. That's so meaningful, so important. So why don't you tell everyone about your services? How do you get paid for your services?
So as the consulting with the care team, it is an out-of-pocket service. And so my clients will pay me out of pocket, and it depends on who I'm working with, how many sessions, but usually we'll do 2 or 3 sessions, and I'll help somebody really know how to problem solve different situations. We'll come up with activities and routines and resources. And then from there, it's kind of as needed. If they would like check-ins every so often as things are progressing and changing, then we'll do that.
Sounds great. Well, do you ever consult with Suzy? We didn't talk about this, but do you ever consult with other parts of the care team?
I do. I would say not arranged by a family member of somebody who has dementia or Parkinson's, but I'm often consulting with caregiving companies, providing training, teaching about how do you communicate, or how does somebody who's working with different people, how do you assess, where this person's at versus this person? And then how do you know how to change your language or support theirs? And so I do work with a lot of different professionals in different ways.
That makes sense. One thing, and we're almost out of time, but you mentioned, a speech pathologist, therapist can help with swallow studies and issues. Can you talk about when that happens and when it's appropriate and needed?
Yes. So swallowing trouble can come from so many different causes. Some common ones are a brain injury, a stroke, dementia, Parkinson's. They can all affect swallowing. There's different phases of swallowing. So sometimes people have swallowing in the throat where everything's moving down. Sometimes it's more of an oral concern, especially if there's a strong cognitive component. It's not that the muscles aren't strong enough, but it's just a disconnect from the brain of knowing what to do. And so I can work in all those different phases of the swallowing and figure out, is it a oral issue or a pharyngeal issue or both? But the things that would make you take note that maybe there is a concern is frequent coughing or even throat clearing, an unexplainable low-grade fever that just won't go away. That could be a sign that maybe some pneumonia is starting to develop from things getting into the airway and into the lungs. If the person is just complaining that they're feeling discomfort with swallowing, that would be a good time to get a speech therapy referral. or if they're holding the food for a long time, or it's like they don't know what to do with the food, that would be another time to call us in.
And that happens in certainly I'm familiar at the later stages of Alzheimer's disease, for sure. But I'm sure there's other times where that happens. So that's so important.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I told you the 30 minutes would go by quickly.
It does.
It does go by quickly. Thank you so much for coming on the program again. Everybody, I think Suzy's information is up in the private chat. And if you have a loved one who, you need some help coaching and how to communicate with them more effectively, make their day better, make your day better, I really highly recommend Suzy and her services.
Thank you so much, Julie.
Yeah, you're welcome. Take good care. Have a great weekend. Thanks again for being on.
You too. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.